The Illinois state capitol erupted in applause Wednesday as lawmakers from both chambers came together for a rare joint session on a U.S. Senate Democratic whip, Dick Durbin. Durbin reflected on his 44 years of public service in Washington representing Illinois, from his early days as legal counsel in Illinois politics to his rise to the U.S. Senate. He spoke about landmark fights like the DREAM Act and recalled his long effort to ban smoking on airplanes, drawing laughter and applause at times from lawmakers as he recounted the battles that defined his career. Durbin also traces political values back to his family's immigrant roots, recalling his mother's journey from Lithuania and the discovery of her naturalization certificate and $2.50 citizenship receipt.
So if you visit my office in the Capitol building, one floor removed from the Senate chamber, on the credenza behind my desk is that naturalization certificate and the receipt. I put it there because I want everybody who comes into my office to realize I am proud to be the son of an immigrant.
State Senator Andrew Chesney made his stance clear Wednesday, choosing not to attend the Illinois General Assembly's rare joint session honoring retiring U.S. Senator Durbin.
Chesney blasted the ceremony as a taxpayer-funded circus and political theater, arguing the focus should be on Illinois economic struggles rather than celebrating Durbin's 4-decade-long congressional career.